The first thing Ethan said to me the night we broke was, "Maybe you'll thank me later." The funny part? I almost believed him. It was New York in early spring, the kind where the air still bites at your skin like winter never left, and I remember thinking how ridiculous it was that heartbreak could make you feel colder than the weather ever could. Ethan stood there, his leather jacket zipped all the way up, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. I stood in front of him, unable to breathe right, unable to even lift my hand to stop him from walking away. Because how do you stop someone who looks so certain they're done with you? Except he wasn't. Not really. The truth was, I knew Ethan better than he wanted me to. I knew the way his voice cracked when he was lying, the way his fingers twitched when he wanted to reach out but forced himself not to, the way his eyes darted down to the pavement because looking at me made it harder to leave. But I let him go anyway, and that's where the story should have ended. Two boys who almost had something, ruined by timing, fear, and the kind of love that felt too heavy to carry. Except it didn't end. Couldn't, because Ethan came back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We met in the most ordinary way, possibly at a diner off Fifth Avenue, 2 in the morning, when the world was quiet enough for strangers to notice each other. I was drinking burnt coffee, scribbling in a notebook I never let anyone read. He slid into the booth across from me like he owned the place, ordered pancakes he barely touched, and asked me what I was writing. "A list," I said. He smirked. "Of what? People you hate." "Worse," I told him. "People I can't forget." That got his attention. And from that night forward, Ethan was someone I couldn't forget either. We were opposites in the most dangerous way, cautious, someone who mapped his life out in little steps because big dreams always felt too far out of reach. Ethan, reckless, the kind of boy who wanted to drive too fast, laugh too loudly, live too much in a city that could swallow him whole. He was magnetic, terrifying, beautiful in the kind of way that makes your chest ache when you look too long. So of course I fell. Hard. The first time he kissed me, it was behind a bookstore, both of us half drunk on cheap whiskey and the thrill of pretending we weren't terrified. His lips were warm, insistent, and I remember clutching the back of his neck like if I let go, I'd lose him forever. He whispered into my mouth, "I don't know what this is yet, but I know I want it." What he didn't say but I heard anyway was that he was scared. And Ethan was never scared of anything. But love changes you. First it was easy. Nights tangled in bedsheets, mornings of burnt toast and coffee we pretended tasted good just because we made it together. He'd steal my notebooks, read my words out loud in that teasing voice of his until I shoved him away, laughing. We had our own world, one we built out of small moments that felt unshakable. But the cracks were always there. Ethan carried something in him, a weight I could never touch no matter how close I held him. He'd disappear for hours without telling me where he went, come back with apologies that tasted like lies. Sometimes he'd look at me like I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and other times like I was the cage keeping him from flying. And me? I stayed. Because when you love someone like Ethan, you don't leave. You just hope that someday he'll choose to stay too. The night everything broke. It was raining so hard the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Ethan stood in the doorway of my apartment, soaked, eyes wild like he'd run all the way there. "We can't keep doing this," he said. I froze. "Doing what?" "This." He gestured between us like the word itself was poison. "You and me. Whatever the hell this is." I felt the words cut deeper than any knife. "So you're just going to throw it all away?" He looked at me then, and for a second I swear I saw his heart crack right in front of me. But he straightened, forced his voice steady. "Maybe you'll thank me later." And then he turned, walked out. The sound of the door slamming was louder than the thunder outside. For weeks I tried to convince myself I hated him. I made lists of all the ways he hurt me, scribbled his name in my notebook with lines slashing through it. I told myself that he was selfish, reckless, incapable of loving me the way I needed. But every time I passed the diner on Fifth, I half expected him to be there, smirking at me over a plate of untouched pancakes. Every time I tried to sleep, I swore I could still feel the ghost of his hand against mine. Love is cruel like that. It lingers even when you beg it to leave. And then just when I finally thought I was learning how to breathe without him, Ethan came back. It was late, another night soaked in rain, as if the city remembered the first time he left and wanted to replay the scene. I was walking home, head down, heart numb, and then I heard it. Wait! I froze. That voice low, rough, too familiar. I turned, and there he was, standing in the middle of the street, chest rising and falling like he'd run again. Rain dripping off his hair, his jacket hanging heavy. My heart stopped. "If you still want to keep me," he said, voice breaking, "there's still time." And just like that, the world tilted on its axis. That night, standing in the rain, I realized love isn't about perfect timing, or flawless people, or stories that make sense. It's about the messy, broken truth of choosing each other anyway. And God help me, I still wanted Ethan, even if it meant risking heartbreak all over again. Ethan's words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I didn't expect them, I didn't expect him at all, but because hearing him say it out loud tore open something I had carefully tried to stitch closed. For weeks, I had built walls around myself, whispering mantras like, "He's gone. He made his choice. You're better off without him." But then he had the audacity to show up in the middle of the street, soaked and desperate, and give me the one thing I'd secretly prayed for every sleepless night: a second chance. I didn't move, couldn't. I just stood there, rain dripping down my face, heart thrashing so loud I swore it echoed off the buildings. Ethan took a step closer, tentative, like approaching a wild animal he wasn't sure wouldn't bite. "You can't just say something like that," I finally managed, voice raw. "You don't get to break me and then come back because you suddenly decided you changed your mind." His lips pressed together, trembling just enough to betray the mask he always wore. "I never stopped wanting you, Liam." The sound of my name on his tongue was enough to make my knees buckle. I wanted to scream at him, hit him, tell him to leave and never come back. But what spilled out instead was quieter, weaker. "Then why the hell did you leave?" He looked down, hands shaking at his sides. "Because I thought I was doing you a favor. I thought you deserved better than a mess like me." It was infuriating, the way he said it, as if I hadn't already known every flaw, every crack in his armor, and loved him anyway. As if he got to decide what I deserved. I wanted to tell him all of that, but my throat tightened around the words. Instead, I whispered the only thing I could. "You don't get to decide that for me." For the first time in weeks, his eyes met mine without flinching. And God, there was so much in them: pain, guilt, longing so fierce it nearly undid me. "Then tell me what you want," he said, voice breaking. "Do you want me gone for good? Or do you want me here? Because I swear, Liam, if you tell me to stay, I'll never walk away again." The problem with love is that your heart always answers before your head has the chance. "Yes," I breathed, before I even realized I'd said it. "Stay." And just like that, he was in front of me, pulling me into him like he'd been starving for weeks. His mouth crashed against mine, rain mixing with the salt of my tears, his arms wrapping around me so tight I thought he'd never let go. For a moment, the world fell away. There was only Ethan, his warmth, his desperate whispers against my lips, the way he clung to me like he was terrified I'd vanish if he blinked. But reality has a cruel way of creeping back in. When we finally pulled apart, gasping for air, I forced myself to say what needed to be said. "This doesn't erase what happened. You can't just come back and expect me to pretend you never left." He nodded, forehead pressed to mine. "I know, and I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm not going anywhere this time." There it was, the plea, raw and trembling, from the boy who never let himself beg. And the truth was, despite every reason I had to push him away, I still wanted him. God help me, I did. The following days felt like learning how to walk again. Ethan stayed close, not in the suffocating way, but in the careful, deliberate way of someone who knew one wrong move could ruin everything. He'd show up at my apartment with coffee, sit on the couch with his hands folded in his lap, waiting for me to either let him stay or send him away. I didn't send him away. Instead, we talked, really talked, about everything we'd avoided before: the lies, the silences, the fear that had driven him out the door that night. Ethan admitted things I'd never heard him say out loud. About his father, who hadn't spoken to him in years after finding out he was gay. About the pressure he carried to be the perfect son, the perfect friend, the perfect boyfriend, even when perfection was impossible. I thought if I left first, I could control it, he confessed one night, his voice barely above a whisper. Because if you left me, I don't think I would have survived it. The weight of his words hung between us. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt that he hadn't trusted me enough to stay. But the truth was, I understood. Fear makes you do reckless, stupid things. And real love makes you terrified of losing it. So I reached for his hand. Just a simple touch, fingers brushing, a quiet promise. You don't have to control everything, Ethan. Not with me. He squeezed back, eyes glistening. I'm trying. For you, I'm trying. But healing is never a straight line. There were nights Ethan would wake up in my bed, drenched in sweat, eyes haunted by dreams he wouldn't talk about. Nights when he'd disappear to the fire escape with a cigarette, staring out at the city like it held the answers to questions he was too afraid to ask me. One night, I followed him out there, wrapping a blanket around both our shoulders. You don't have to fight everything alone, I said softly. His jaw clenched. I don't want you to see me like this. Like what? Like I'm broken. I turned his face toward mine, forcing him to look at me. You're not broken. You're human. And I don't want perfect, Ethan. I just want you. Something in him cracked then, and he buried his face in my neck, shaking silently as I held him. Slowly, painfully, we found our way back to each other. It wasn't the reckless, burning love we'd had before, the one that consumed us until it destroyed itself. This time it was different, softer, steadier, built from the ashes of what almost ended us. We still fought, of course. Ethan had a temper, and I had a tendency to shut down when I was hurt. But we learned how to meet in the middle. He learned how to apologize without running, and I learned how to forgive without keeping score. One evening, as we lay tangled on the couch, Ethan brushed his fingers over my notebook. Still making lists? He asked. Yeah, I said, smiling faintly. Of what this time? People I don't want to lose. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes soft in the dim light. Then, with a shaky breath, he whispered, Am I at the top? I turned to him, pressing my forehead against his. You never left the top. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time, I realized that maybe that was enough. For a while, I let myself believe that second chances could be simple. That once Ethan came back, we could rebuild without looking over our shoulders. But love isn't a fairy tale, it's a war. And sometimes the enemy isn't the world outside. Sometimes it's the ghosts you carry with you. The first ghost came in the form of Ethan's father. It was a Sunday afternoon when Ethan's phone lit up with a number he hadn't seen in years. He froze, staring at it like it might explode in his hand. I was on the couch, half buried in papers for work, and I noticed how pale he went. Who is it? I asked. He swallowed hard. My dad. I sat up immediately. Are you going to answer? His thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. Then, with a sharp inhale, he pressed accept. The conversation was short, brutal in its simplicity. His father's voice, stern, cold, echoed through the line. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear enough. The clipped tones. The way Ethan's shoulders hunched. Like every syllable was a blow. When he finally hung up, his face was a storm. What did he say? I asked carefully. That he heard I was playing house with some boy? Ethan muttered, voice tight. And that he wanted me to remember I'll never be part of his family if I keep choosing this life. The silence after that was suffocating. I didn't know what to say, how to make it better. All I could do was reach for his hand. But he pulled away, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. You don't get it, Liam, he snapped suddenly. You don't know what it's like to be told you're not enough by the one person who's supposed to love you no matter what. The words stung, but I stayed quiet. Because he was right. My family wasn't perfect, but at least I'd never been told I was unworthy of love. Ethan stopped pacing, staring at me with eyes full of fire and despair. Sometimes I think maybe he's right. That maybe I am a mistake. I stood then, crossing the room before he could move away. I grabbed his face in both hands, forcing him to look at me. Don't you ever say that again. You're not a mistake, Ethan. You're the best damn thing that's ever happened to me. His breath hitched, and for a second, I thought he might break. But instead, he kissed me hard, desperate, as if trying to drown out his father's words with mine. The cracks showed after that. Ethan grew restless, throwing himself into late nights, reckless choices that made my chest tighten with fear. I'd wait up for him, pacing our small apartment until I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Sometimes he'd come home bruised, reeking of smoke and liquor. One night I couldn't hold it in anymore. You can't keep doing this, I told him as he stumbled into the kitchen, dropping his jacket carelessly onto the floor. You can't keep disappearing and expect me to just sit here and pretend I'm not terrified. He leaned against the counter, rubbing his eyes. I'm not trying to hurt you. Then what the hell are you trying to do? My voice cracked, because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're testing me. Like you're waiting to see how much I'll take before I finally leave. His head shot up, eyes blazing. I'm testing myself, Liam. I'm trying to figure out if I'm strong enough to stay. And some nights, I don't know if I am. The words landed like stones in my stomach. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could come back into my life only to dangle himself over the edge again. But instead, I whispered the question that had haunted me since the day he left. Do you even want this? Do you want us? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, cupping my face with trembling hands. More than anything, but wanting and believing I deserve it. Those aren't the same thing. And just like that, I understood. Ethan wasn't fighting me. He was fighting himself. We tried therapy. I suggested it one night, half expecting him to laugh in my face. But to my surprise, he agreed. Maybe he was tired of carrying everything alone. The sessions were raw, brutal at times. Ethan admitted things I never imagined he'd say out loud about the first time he realized he was gay. About the shame that wrapped around him like a vice. About the years he spent trying to be someone else to earn his father's love. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he confessed once. For you to wake up and realize I'm too much or not enough or both. And then you'll leave, and it'll be my fault all over again. My chest ached as I reached for his hand. I'm not leaving, Ethan. Not unless you push me so far away that I can't find you anymore. But if you keep running, one day I might not be able to catch you. The room was quiet after that, but something in his eyes shifted. Like maybe, for the first time, he believed me. Months passed. Slowly, carefully, we carved out a rhythm that felt almost normal. Sunday mornings spent cooking pancakes in the kitchen, Ethan insisting on flipping them even though he burned half. Late-night walks through the city, his fingers laced with mine as if daring the world to see us. But normal never lasts forever. The second ghost came in the form of his past, the people he'd run with before me, the choices he'd made when he thought he had nothing to lose. One night, a guy named Marcus showed up at our door, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. You owe me, Ethan, Marcus hissed. And I'm done waiting. I'd never seen Ethan go so still. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him, but I pressed my ear to the wood. The conversation was muffled, tense. Words like money, debt, trouble. When he came back in, his face was pale, his jaw tight. What was that? I demanded. Nothing you need to worry about, he muttered, heading for the bedroom. Don't you dare shut me out again, I snapped, following him. Not after everything we've been through. He turned, eyes burning. It's my mess, Liam. I won't drag you into it. But he already had. And in that moment, I realized that loving Ethan meant living with the ghosts he carried, the family that rejected him, the past that haunted him, the fear that threatened to unravel us. The question was, could we survive them? That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his uneven breathing. I thought about all the ways this could end him running again, me breaking under the weight of it, both of us collapsing before we ever had the chance to see what we could become. But then he shifted in his sleep, unconsciously reaching for me. his hand gripping mine like a lifeline. And I knew, as long as he reached for me, I'd keep holding on. Even if it broke me. Ethan's ghosts didn't politely fade into the background. They clawed their way into our lives, threatening to drag him back into the shadows he had fought so hard to escape. And suddenly, it wasn't just about whether he could stay, it was about whether we could survive. The debt Marcus mentioned wasn't small. It wasn't just about money either. Ethan had fallen in with people who thrived on chaos, and walking away hadn't been as simple as closing a door. They wanted him back. Or they wanted to destroy him. When he told me the truth, his voice cracked with shame. I thought I could handle it on my own, he admitted, sitting on the edge of our bed with his hands buried in his hair. I thought I could just pay him off, make it disappear. But it's bigger than I thought. And now it's bleeding into us. I sat beside him, fighting the urge to scream. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His laugh was bitter. Because every time I bring you closer to my mess, I feel like I'm poisoning the only good thing I've ever had. I touched his arm, forcing him to look at me. Ethan, you don't poison me. You don't ruin me. You give me reasons to fight. So stop trying to protect me by tearing yourself apart. He stared at me for a long time, and then, slowly, he nodded. For the first time, he let me in fully. The weeks that followed were chaos. We dealt with Marcus, with the threats, with the ugly truth of what Ethan had been running from. There were moments I thought we wouldn't make it, nights when Ethan's hands shook as he told me stories about the things he'd done to survive. Nights when I questioned if love alone could keep us standing. But every time the fear threatened to drown us, he reached for me. Every time I doubted, I found his hand in mine. One night, after a particularly brutal confrontation with Marcus, Ethan collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. You should leave me, he muttered. You should run before I drag you under with me. I knelt in front of him, pulling his hands away. I'm not going anywhere. Do you get that? You can try to push me away, but I'll just keep coming back. Because I love you, Ethan. And that's not changing. His eyes filled with tears he tried so hard to hide, and then he pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the only anchor left in the storm. Time, therapy, and brutal honesty slowly stitched us back together. Marcus faded from our lives after Ethan took the terrifying step of going to the police, cutting ties with the past once and for all. It wasn't easy, it never would be, but it was a start. And in the quiet after the storm, something new bloomed between us. Not just love, but trust. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, we found ourselves back at the diner where it all began. The same booth, the same burnt coffee, the same city buzzing just beyond the window. Ethan looked at me across the table, a soft smile tugging at his lips. Remember what you told me that night? That you were making a list of people you couldn't forget. I chuckled. Yeah. And then you forced your way onto it. He leaned closer, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen before. Peace. Do you still make lists? Sometimes. Am I still at the top? I reached across the table, lacing my fingers with his. You've never left the top. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy this time, it was full, warm, alive. Then Ethan cleared his throat, pulling something from his jacket pocket. A small box. My heart stuttered. He opened it to reveal a simple silver band. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just us, distilled into something real. I don't know if I'll ever stop being scared, he admitted, voice low. But I do know one thing. Every time I think about my future, you're in it. And I don't ever want to know a life where you're not. So, stay with me. Not just tonight. Not just until the next storm. Stay with me for good. My vision blurred with tears as I stared at him, the boy who once ran, who once broke me, now sitting in front of me with his heart wide open. Yes, I whispered, my voice breaking. 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands trembling. And then he leaned across the table, kissing me softly, like the whole city could burn down around us and he'd still choose me. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. We still fought. We still struggled. Ethan still carried scars that would take years to heal. But now we faced it all together. And on the nights when the weight of the world pressed too heavy on his shoulders, when he curled against me with fear still lingering in his eyes, I'd whisper the words he once gave me under a rain-soaked sky. If you still want to keep me, Ethan, there's still time. And every single time he'd answer without hesitation, I'll never let go. The truth about love is that it isn't about perfection, or certainty, or promises that can never break. It's about the choice you make over and over again to stay. And when I was about to let go, Ethan turned back. And we chose each other. Always. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.